Okay, welcome to the video about externalities, positive and negative externalities. There are some things that are good for society, right? We want more of them. We want more medication. We want more education. We want more research, right? And there are some things that are bad for society, things that hurt not only the people that uh, engage in the behaviors, but potentially other people. So too much carbon emissions, smoking, consumption of alcohol. All of those things are things that there's too much of it, right? We want to slow it down. So how do we deal with that? First of all, the title of the whole arena is called market failure. And market failure means that essentially the allocation of resources that we want to take place is not taking place because there's too much being purchased or too little being purchased. If there's negative externalities, okay, it's too much of a bad thing. So negative externalities involve taxes. We tax those things to reduce the consumption of them. All right. So we say that there is an over allocation of resources to things that have a negative externality, right? In Mr. Gallo's perfect world, the correct number of cigarettes consumed would be 0, okay? That would be the correct number, but I have a personal hatred of cigarettes because I've lost loved ones to lung cancer, etc. But I don't want to get too far down there. I think we all know cigarettes are bad for you. Okay, so let's take a look at the market for cigarettes. All right, and I have no idea. I'm proud to say I never purchased a pack of cigarettes, but let's say a pack of cigarettes costs $8 in the natural market. So if there's no government involvement or interference in the market, we'll say that it's $8, and we'll just say for a number of purposes that there's 1,000 packs purchased. All right, but we have our supply, all right, which is relatively elastic supply, and this is important. The demand for cigarettes is relatively inelastic. All right, and that'll be important as we discuss taxes as to who ends up bearing the burden of the tax. All right. The demand is going to be called the marginal private benefit and the marginal social benefit here. All right, demand is the marginal private benefit. There is no extra benefit to society from smoking, quite the opposite. So marginal private benefit and marginal social benefit are the same as demand here. So in case that comes up, you never know with AP, they may label this as demand. They may label it as marginal social benefit, probably. But it's also possible they could say it's marginal private benefit, and then you need to know that marginal private benefit and marginal social benefit are the same thing. So the emphasis is on the costs here. There's outside costs to society or externalities, external costs, sometimes called secondary effects. And here's our supply curve intersecting with the demand, giving us a price of $8. Well, there's sickness, death, pollution, fires, medical costs, okay? Those are all external costs, and that creates the marginal social cost. The marginal social cost, the MSC, equals marginal private cost, which is the supply, plus the marginal external cost, which is all those costs to society. All right, and we are going to tax the cigarettes equal to the marginal external cost. All right, that's what's supposed to happen in these markets to correct them. And I'm going to draw on a new supply curve. So this is our supply plus the tax, which equals the marginal social cost. Okay, so we have two curves here, marginal private cost and marginal social cost. This is the quantity in the natural market. The goal of the tax is to get fewer people smoking, okay? Well, here is where our marginal social cost equals our marginal social benefit, and we're gonna come straight down here. And then 700, this becomes our allocatively efficient quantity, okay? That's our allocatively efficient quantity. This is the equilibrium quantity, all right? Well, we want to be at allocative efficiency, okay? Too bad allocative efficiency should be 0 in my world, but yeah, we'll just go along with it. All right, well, now we have a more expensive price to the consumer. The consumer was paying $8. The producer was receiving $8, and the government was not involved. Well, now the government's involved, the government's receiving the tax. Well, the consumer pays $11 now, where the supply hits this new supply curve hits the demand curve. And the producer receives less. The producer receives $7. All right? So, well, what has happened? Okay. The consumer now is paying $3 more. There's a $3 effect of the tax on the consumer. The producer is receiving $1 less. Well, who's paying a bigger burden of the tax? The consumer, right? They're paying this box right here in taxes. The producer is paying this box here in total in taxes. Per case, or per, oh gosh, I don't even know, pack, thank you. Can you tell I hate smoking? The whole concept of smoking? Who said, I'm gonna light something on fire and put it in my mouth and it's gonna get all in my eyes and my face? And then I'll breathe it on the person next to me. Great idea. Okay, so the producer receives $7, consumer pays $11. Well, where does that $4 go? To the government, right? So the government is gonna get a tax of $4. So the tax equals $4, which equals the marginal external cost. Okay? All right, and the allocatively efficient quantity here is 700. Remember, at allocative efficiency, there is no deadweight loss. But that's our key point in determining deadweight loss. This is where we want to be an efficient market. Well, if we're at 1,000 quantity, if we're at equilibrium, well, now I'm going to have this region here. I'm going to draw, okay, so this is a little tough to follow, so I just want to make sure. This triangle here, so I drew up at a quantity of 1,000, the equilibrium quantity, I'm going to go straight up from there. Okay, that's the inefficient quantity, so there's dead weight loss there. And we're going to have this arrow, if you will. This little region here is going to be our dead weight loss. All right, so that this kind of arrow, if you will, points to the allocatively efficient quantity, which we deemed right there. Okay. Now this is a likely candidate for the AP question because again, there's a lot going on here. All right. Let's take a look what happens to consumer surplus as a result of the tax. Well, the consumer was paying $8 and they had this big triangle here, okay, as consumer surplus. Well, now the consumer surplus is going to be this smaller triangle here, all right? So with taxes, kind of everything gets worse as far as paying money and receiving money for the consumer and producer. So consumer and producer surplus both decrease. So this is my consumer surplus. It was this big triangle here. And then producer surplus is this smaller triangle here. it was this somewhat larger triangle that went all the way up to $8. Okay, remember, quick review, consumer surplus is, you know, the money that a consumer is willing and able to pay, but they don't have to. If I just run 10 miles and it's 100 degrees outside, I might pay $10 for a Gatorade. I don't have to pay $10 for a Gatorade. I pay $2. That's $8 extra money for me, right? Producer surplus is when a producer receives more money than they're willing and able to sell something for. So let's say you go on eBay to sell your old book, you're willing to sell it for 20 and you get 50, that's $30 of producer surplus. Consumer surplus makes consumers happy, producer surplus makes producers happy, and they can both enjoy surplus at the same time. You might sell the book for 50 and the person who bought it might have been willing to pay $95. Everybody's happy, right? Okay. Couple other things. If AP really wants to be jerks, in other words, what's probably going to happen? If AP really wants to be jerks, again, what's probably going to happen, what they might ask you is, how much consumer surplus, or what's the region of consumer surplus that was lost as a result of the tax? Well, this was the consumer surplus before, this is the consumer surplus now, so this would be the lost consumer surplus. Okay. All right. It's kind of looking like, you know, a witch or something there. Okay. See the witch's hat here? Okay. And then what would be the lost producer's surplus? That would be this region here. One of my favorite shapes, a trapezoid. Okay, this total region of loss is the loss of consumer producer surplus. Okay. All right. Make sure you know how to calculate total revenue before and after. Okay. And total consumer spending. All right, so just do some quick work over here. Before the tax, pre-tax is easy, right? It's just $8 times 1,000. Total revenue equals $8,000 for the producer. Total consumer spending is $8,000, 8 times 1,000 for the producer. After the tax, all right, after the tax, which is $4 per unit, what is the total consumer spending? Well, a consumer spends $11 per pack times 7, so total consumer spending is going to equal 11 times 700, which is $7,700. Okay, the total revenue, sorry, oh, that's right. The total revenue is what the producer receives times the quantity. So 7 times 700 equals $4,900. Okay, well, everything has to, you know, if the consumer is spending $7,700, that money's got to go somewhere. So I now know that the tax, the total tax received, equals 7,700 minus 4,900, which is 2,800. The nice thing about this is I have another way to check to make sure that I got that right. Well, the tax per unit is 4 times 700 is 2,800. That matches up nicely. Okay, so these are some of the questions that AP is going to ask. Okay, first of all, there's an over allocation of resources. It's bad for society. Okay, we want to tax this. Okay, we want to tax it equal to the marginal external costs. Okay, so we want the tax, you know, it's It's the best guess that they can give. But essentially, how much do fires cost? How much does a cancer cost? How much does the loss of life cost? How much does the medical cost? And the $4 is equal to those marginal external costs. Okay. The consumer is going to pay more. Forgot to talk about this. Why does the consumer pay more? Well, the reason is it's inelastic demand. And when there's inelastic demand, the consumer is going to buy it anyway. All right? No matter what, the consumer is, in general, semi-addicted to things that are inelastic. And the government is going to reduce it as much as they can, but they also benefit in a way from it being inelastic. Parking inelastic, alcohol inelastic, soft drinks inelastic demand. So even though it's reduced, it's not reduced by that much in quantity, so the government can keep getting revenue. But anyway, you'll see that the producer is only paying $1 per unit tax because they were getting 8 before, and the consumer is getting paying $11, so they're paying $3 per unit. The region of the tax is this rectangle here. Don't worry too much about that, but you can visually see the region the producer is paying in tax is here. The region the consumer is paying in tax is there. This is the allocatively efficient quantity. So if they say how much dead weight loss is there at the quantity of 700, you would say there's no dead weight loss. Okay. If they really want to be jerks, okay, and they may want to, they might ask you to calculate the region of dead weight loss here. Okay. Well, that's the area of a triangle. This would be 300 times 4 divided by 2. The dead weight loss would be equal to 600. Okay. Not likely, but also not impossible. They might ask you to calculate the area of a triangle. They could ask you to calculate the region of consumer surplus. Okay. Area of a triangle, 1/2 base times height. Or the region of producer surplus. What's the value of that? All right, so again, the demand curve here could be called demand. It could be called marginal social benefit. And because marginal social benefit equals marginal private benefit, there's no positive externalities from smoking. So those are all equal to each other. So it could be called any of those three. Here, supply is equal to marginal private cost. Supply plus the tax is marginal social cost. So this, if this is called supply, this would be called supply plus tax. You might hear likely, they won't just call it a tax like I am, and this is one of my weaknesses. They're going to call it an excise tax, which is a per unit tax. All right. So if it's an excise tax, per unit tax, the excise tax is equal to $4 per unit. All right. I'm going to quick change the whiteboard to positive externalities, and we'll go through this real quickly. Maybe I should sing a song or something. Pass the time. All right, so if I have a positive externality here, it's the opposite situation. We are not consuming enough of something that's positive for society. So I usually do flu shots for excitement. I did solar panels. Well, in the market for solar panels, the natural market is $100 at a quantity of 1,500. Well, solar panels are renewable energy. There's no carbon emissions. We want more people purchasing them, but consumers aren't willing to spend more than 100, and producers aren't willing to receive less than 100. So we need to do something to correct this market failure. So we put in a subsidy, and here the supply equals the marginal social cost, which also equals the marginal private cost, because for our purposes there are no negative externalities. So the marginal private cost and the marginal social cost are equal to each other. We have a marginal external benefit of using renewable energy. So we're going to have the demand equals the marginal private benefit. The demand plus the subsidy equals the marginal social benefit. And here, the marginal private benefit plus the marginal external benefit equals the marginal social benefit. Well, to get us to this 2,000, this allocatively efficient quantity, to increase the quantity from 1,500 to 2,000, we need to put in a subsidy of $65. Okay, all right. And where do I get that 65? Well, the producer is going to receive $135, but the producer is only willing and able to pay 70 to get us out to 2,000 quantity. So again, the producer receives $135. They're getting a benefit of $35. They were receiving 100, now they're receiving 135. The consumer is paying only 70 and they were paying 100. But there's an additional benefit to both of them. This is creating an opportunity for more people to be able to buy and sell at greater quantity. So not only is it a lower price, it's making it available to more people, which is the reason for the subsidy. So we have the 135 to 70. This is producer receives 135, consumer pays 70. Okay, the consumer is receiving a benefit of $70. Notice it's not free, but it's more available. All right. What's going to happen to consumer and producer surplus? There's going to be more of it. Okay. Allocated efficient quantity is the 2,000. 1,500, there's market failure. We're not producing enough for society. Okay. All right. This provides too much of a benefit to society, right? Other things that produce benefits to society: museums, research, education. Okay, one could argue with the coronavirus epidemic that all these programs for e-learning have an incalculable value, okay, and might need to be subsidized. All right, as far as dead weight loss goes, well, 2,000, here's the allocatively efficient quantity. If we are producing at 1,500, this would be our dead weight loss. We're not producing enough. So again, the arrow points to this dot that represents allocatively efficient quantity. All right, and allocative efficiency always takes place where, I'm running out of space here, but allocative efficiency is where MSB equals MSC. The marginal social benefit equals the marginal social cost. All right. The total subsidy paid. That could be a challenging question. The government, everybody's winning here except for the government in terms of money, and they're paying $65 per unit. Well, 65 times 2,000, I believe, is $130,000 in subsidies that the government is paying. All right, so that's a potential question. What is the total revenue received by the firm? Well, they're getting $135 per unit, 2,000 quantity. So that'd be $270,000 in revenue. Whereas before they were getting $150,000 in revenue. Okay. So that's $120,000 of additional revenue. How much is the producer paying before and after? Well, before they're paying $150,000, okay, in the natural market, and then after they're paying 70 times 2,000 is 140,000. Okay. Alrighty. So that's externalities, positive and negative. If you have any questions or anything, email me. But it's a pretty comprehensive. Negative externalities are more likely to be on the AP exam, but you never know.